In the meantime, though, like I said, like we promised, we got to just quickly head back out to New Orleans. And that is where some of our reporters are standing by. We've been relying on them throughout the course of the day, including none other than our own Fox News multimedia reporter, Sarah Allegre, and she joins us from the scene with the latest here. Sarah, good to see you. What more do we know?
Yeah, hi there, Andrew. Right now, we're just having the FBI ask the public if they have any kind of information that helps them piece together this puzzle of the moments that led to that deadly attack that killed those 14 innocent lives. Now, on the other hand, we also have family, friends, even strangers right now just grappling with the what-ifs.
My heart is so heavy right now. It's really heavy.
We love Terry Kennedy. That's one out of many messages plastered on the walls of a growing vigil along Bourbon Street. This comes just 2 days after Shamsud-Din Jabbar drove his pickup truck into a crowd of people early Wednesday morning.
Terry was a sweet and kind person. He was very sweet and kind.
Eddie Williams visited the site of the attack in honor of his uncle, Terrence Kennedy, who was one of the 14 victims in the New Year's tragedy. He was a 63-year-old New Orleans native who called Bourbon Street his second home. Williams saw him there just the night before.
And the last thing I told him, I said, I'll see you later. I guess it's going to be later than I thought.
Alongside the many messages is a cross where people from near and far stop to pay their respects. All shaken by the attack the FBI is calling an act of terror.
This is somebody's child. This is somebody's mom. You know, these were people's cousins and grandparents.
Roberto Marquez is an artist who drove to the French Quarter from Texas.
Those families, it's good that they know that we care.
Marquez says he felt called to build these 14 crosses and paint a mural for a grieving community.
Not only the families, but also when people come, they pay their respects. We're united, we're here, and you are not alone.
And while the city finds their solace and strength and hope, they remain vigilant.
We just have to take it one day at a time, because like that senseless act like that right there that happened, who knows when something else like that'll happen again.
Also tell Fox News that both the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security are warning local law enforcement agencies across the country of any possible copycat attacks. In New Orleans, Sarah Allegre, back to you.
Sarah, thanks so much. Can you give us a sense how Bourbon Street is doing? We saw live some of those memorials. Are businesses open?
Yeah, businesses are open, up and running, and I know that they need this. This is a time, especially with the Sugar Bowl, that they would really benefit from. Would have economic benefit, I should say. So we have a mix of businesses open, but then also a somber feel in the air. These visuals continue to grow, and we have a couple just along here in the French District. So a lot of people, a lot of family we've met, a lot of friends we've met, and just individuals who are visiting these memorials, paying their respects. A lot of folks just praying with one another at the current moment. So, of course, on the other hand, we have a developing investigation at the same time, trying to piece together more information as to what led up to this incident on New Year's morning.
All right, Sarah Allegre there for us live in New Orleans. Sarah, thanks for bringing us this update. We'll check in soon. All right, in the meantime here, we do want to take a quick commercial break. We're at the bottom of the hour almost. Remember, we're waiting for this live press conference to happen there. We're going to hear from the Los Angeles District Attorney, Nathan Hochman. He met today with members of the family of Lyle and Eric Menendez, the Menendez brothers, who, remember, are serving time in prison and have been for 30-plus years for their role and connection with murdering their parents. This has been the subject of a very popular series on Netflix, of a very popular documentary on Netflix just in the last 6 months, and that has brought a renewed sense of attention to their plight and to their case. They have many in their corner, many sympathizers who say it's time for them to be either released or to be resentenced, and that's a line we have heard from their attorney, the high-powered criminal defense attorney, Mark Garagos, representing the brothers post-conviction. So we're going to hear, though, from the DA who has to review the case, who has to look at the case. You'll remember that before the November election, we brought you that story that then DA at the time, George Gascon, said he was considering reviewing the case for a possible resentencing of the case. Now, he lost his election. Nathan Hochman became the new district attorney in Los Angeles, and said at the time that he would review that decision, essentially putting the brakes on this momentum that had been gained for some time in the case of the Menendez brothers. So we will bring that live press conference once it gets going, but we got to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're touching on some of these key business headlines today. President Biden late last night kind of putting the nail in the coffin, finally there, of this proposed acquisition by Japanese steelmaker Nippon Steel. Remember, they wanted to purchase and acquire U.S. steel. President Biden putting the kibosh on that, blocking that very sale just yesterday. We'll be breaking down the dynamics of what that means, not only for all the key stakeholders, but the overall U.S. economy. We'll have that segment for you after the break. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft, live picture there at the White House. We want to talk about the U.S. economy and a story we really have been covering from the very beginning here on Live Now. Right when it was announced that Japanese steelmaker Nippon Steel wanted to acquire U.S. Steel. You know, U.S. Steel, a long and storied American business institution. Well, now, as of last night, President Biden is blocking that sale. This was first reported by the Washington Post last night. They say this: Biden decides to block the U.S. Steel sale to Japanese buyer, and they say the move threatens the future of the once iconic American business and is expected as early as Friday. Well, it did come and go here. Fox News correspondent Lucas Tomlinson has more on this from Washington.
This is not about Japan. It's not.
Today, President Biden blocked the $15 billion acquisition of U.S. Steel by a Japanese corporation. Biden did not speak about his decision. The White House issued a statement. This acquisition would place one of America's largest steel producers under foreign control and create risk for our national security and our critical supply chains. Japan is considered one of the U.S.'s strongest allies. More than 50,000 American troops are based there, along with dozens of warships since World War II. Japan's Nippon Steel had offered the U.S. government the ability to veto any restrictions to the company's steel production. The United Steelworkers Union supports Biden's decision, but many of its members, the workers, wanted the deal to go through to protect their jobs, according to the Washington Post. In a joint statement, Nippon and U.S. Steel are calling Biden's decision politically motivated, saying blocking this transaction means denying billions of committed investment to extend the life of U.S. Steel's aging facilities and putting thousands of good-paying, family-sustaining union jobs at risk. The White House rejected the statement.
That's a hypothetical. I'm not going to get into hypotheticals.
A top economic advisor to President Obama accused Biden of being short-sighted. President Biden claiming Japan's investment in an American steel company is a threat to national security is a pathetic and craven cave to special interests that will make America less prosperous and safe. It's not often that President Biden and President-elect Trump agree. This time they do. They both want U.S. Steel to stay in American hands. At the White House, Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News.
Lucas, thanks so much. In the meantime here, I want to put up this. This is interesting. It's some context. CBS News reporting that the U.S. Trade Representative Katherine Tai, she is a member of CFIUS, has concerns about the deal's impact on labor and is opposed to the deal, though other CFIUS members, including the Justice Department, the Treasury Department, and the State Departments, are not opposed. CFIUS stands for Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. Members of that committee have to approve mergers, acquisitions, and sales of this nature here. I want to put this up as well. This is a statement we're getting from the Chamber of Commerce. They say this, that the Biden administration's politicization of Nippon Steel's acquisition of U.S. Steel threatens to impose a high economic cost on the American people in the years ahead. The first detrimental impacts will likely be felt by steel workers in Pennsylvania, Indiana, and other states whose livelihoods are threatened by this decision. The decision also could have a chilling effect on international investment in America. The investment of our important and reliable ally, Japan, supports nearly 1 million American jobs alone. The business community will continue to work to facilitate investments from abroad that help grow our economy and support American families. That's from the head of the Chamber of Commerce, John Murphy. So we're going to be bringing in some of our reporters there to help us make sense of this a little bit later on tonight. But don't you worry, we're going to dive deep into that blocked sale by Biden today of U.S. Steel by Nippon Steel. In the meantime, though, we do have the district attorney in Los Angeles, Nathan Hochman. He just took the podium. Remember, he met today with members of the Menendez family as he continues to review the Menendez brothers' case. Let's listen.
Affirm these convictions. So we've been doing that effort, and that effort continues. As part of that effort, what I said is that I would also speak to any victim family member who wanted to speak with me. And that's what we did today. A number of the victim family members came in. It was a very productive session where they gave me all their thoughts about what should happen in this case, their experiences that they wanted to share, the ultimate direction that they wanted this case to go. And so it was a very productive conversation over a number of hours. Again, I invite and have continued to invite any additional victim family member, and I think virtually all of them were there today, that wanted to speak with me, to speak with me. And that forms part of the information data set that we will use to determine what the right result should be in both the habeas proceedings, although the impact, the family victim members' impact is less important as far as a habeas proceeding goes, as well as the resentencing issues that are going to be coming forth. Right now, the resentencing hearing is set for January 30th and 31st. That date is the date we're working against. If it changes, we'll certainly let you know. And we will continue to do this difficult but important work of reviewing the facts and the law to make the right decision in this case. So that is the remarks I wanted to start with. I'll now open it up for any questions.
Did anything change after meeting with the family in your mind?
In my mind. Again, what I'm doing is processing all this information. So we have not finished the review, for instance, of all the prison files. Again, it numbers in the thousands of pages, covering well over 30 years of prison experience for both Lyle and Eric Menendez. Nor have I finished reviewing all the trial transcripts as well. But we're inputting that additional information that I received today, which was useful information, into the entire decision matrix on what to do with this case.
How was it helpful, though?
Well, again, I've had the chance to read everything any of these victim family members have either testified about or written. And hearing it live directly from them is a very useful additional way to learn that information.
Do you feel that family members that were there that don't want the Menendez brothers to be resentenced or released, or was everyone who was there today in favor of their release?
So the actual contents of what was discussed, it was in some ways an informal, off-the-record discussion where I invited them to tell me anything they wanted to tell me. So I'm not going to relay to you one way or the other what it is precisely that they said, which is what I'm not going to do.
You say you're looking
Yes.
for what would constitute rehabilitation when you look at the prison records and have these conversations. What in your mind constitutes rehabilitation?
Well, again, we're going to follow the law as it deals with rehabilitation. And part of rehabilitation is, have you engaged in any additional illegal conduct while you've been in prison? If so, what type of conduct? Have you done anything positive in prison? Have you started organizations that help other prisoners, as one example? Have you yourself used that time to improve yourself, done nothing, or on the flip side, done something harmful while you've been there? Those are all the different types of factors that you look into as far as rehabilitation. And that's why you go through the prison records, which are voluminous, to make that calculation.
So just to follow up on that really quickly, I know you're not going to give us an answer now, but there's both a yes and a no when you go through some of the records and the sentencing reports. There's a cell phone that shows up at one point. There's fights that happen. There's very positive things that happen, efforts to help other inmates. So how do you square them against one another?
You look at them all. So you don't look at any one instance in isolation. You look at the entire record of behavior while they've been in prison for over 3 decades. And ultimately what you're doing is you're providing that information, as we intend to do, to the court, because the court makes the final decision here. Though the DA has started the process by filing a reconsideration motion, as you're aware, the court has also filed its own motion for reconsideration. And the court ultimately has the final call on, first, whether it wants to reconsider the sentence at all, and second, if it does want to reconsider, what the new sentence should be. And the state legislature, through the laws of resentencing, has given the court an enormous amount of power to do that. And as you're aware, depending on the sentence, if the sentence provides for the ability to then have parole, and that would, in the Menendez cases, potentially impact the youthful parole statutes that have also been passed, then the decision would ultimately go to a parole board on whether or not to grant parole. And as far as that goes, a parole board, which usually is just 2 people, would make that decision, and then the governor himself, if it was to be a grant of parole, would have 120 days to make one of 3 decisions: either agree with the parole board, disagree and reverse the parole board, or send it back to the full parole board to actually consider the case.
So right now, you haven't made any decision?
I have not.
You previously said you might consider the brothers separately and give 2 different recommendations. Is that still true? Please stand on that.
So let me make it crystal clear what I said before and the implication of it. In any case, whether it's the Menendez case or any case, you look at each individual defendant separately. You look at each individual crime separately. There's effectively 3 crimes that they were convicted of. One dealing with the first-degree murder of Jose Menendez, their father. One dealing with the first-degree murder of their mother, Kitty Menendez, and then a conspiracy statute tying them all both together. So you would look at each individual crime, and then each individual, for the resentencing's, rehabilitation. Now, that might lead you to the same results. It might lead you to different results. And I'm not here to predetermine where we're going to end up for each individual defendant and each individual crime. That's what this analysis is all about.
The victim's family. May I ask a couple of questions, please? Can you describe just in general, what was the tone of the meeting? You know, it's roughly 3 hours by my calculation. You know, was it a good give and take? Was it emotional?
It was a productive meeting. That's how I'll describe it.
And the second question, when you talk about rereading the transcripts, you're talking about both the trial and then the retrial. I ask that because just that alone seems like it would be an enormous task. So I'm curious how much of your time and everything else that's on your plate this is taking.
It's taking a lot of time, but it's one of those decisions that you want to make sure you get right. So I'm working with a team of people that are also engaged in reading these transcripts. And then bringing to my attention the transcripts that they're reading. I read those transcripts. So it's there's not a lot of free time in my life right now, but that's okay. I didn't sign up for a job that said I was going to have a lot of free time. And so we're going to spend the time necessary to get this decision right.
Can you talk about, do you speak directly yourself personally to Eric and Lyle? Will you communicate directly with them at any point? And does the number of family members mean anything in this consideration?
The number is not as important as the fact that the statements that the family members have made before and continue to make. So whether the number is 1 or 26, the number itself is not that important. As far as speaking with the Menendezes, no decision has been made to speak directly with the Menendezes themselves.
District Attorney, the victim's family has said in previous statements that they are considering petitioning a request for the state Attorney General's office to review this case out of concern of how you're going to go. Did they express that to you, and what is your reaction to
They did not express that to me at this meeting.
And your reaction to that?
I don't believe that there's any conflict of interest or justification for the state attorney general to take over this case. Ultimately, the state attorney general can do their own analysis and reach whatever conclusion they want.
Is there anyone still with the office that was assigned to the case? And if not, are you speaking with any of the former ADAs that were prosecuting the case?
Yes and yes. So yes, there are former prosecutors who are still with the office that I've spoken to. And yes, there are people who were affiliated with the case early on that I've also spoken with.
The lawyer for the family, Mark Agarios, canceled his press conference that he was supposed to have this afternoon. Should we read anything into that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
The lawyer for the family canceled his press conference this afternoon after the meeting. Should we read anything into that?
I wouldn't know one way or the other.
Can you talk about how many attorneys in your office are working on this and whether you think a decision by your office can be made by that January 30th date?
A number of attorneys are working on this beside myself. And right now, that January 30th date is a date that we intend to hold to. Again, if something comes up that militates us asking for additional time, we'll certainly go to the court before we would go to the press, and then we afterwards let you know. All right. Thank you all very much for coming today. And as developments come up, we'll have one last question.
The family has been back and forth about this regarding the appointment of Kathleen Katie to the Office of Victim Services and that appointment and the associations with this case and her former representation of a family member. Differently than the bulk of these family members?
Certainly. Kathy Katie will be starting as the director of the Bureau of Victim Service come Monday. Kathy Katie is walled off from the Menendez case. I've had very limited conversations with Kathy Katie about this, other than to be referred to the pleading that she submitted back in October on behalf of her client. And with respect to that client, who will now have new representation, if that client wants to speak with me, I will make myself available as I have for the other victim family members. So thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
All right, so there you have it. That's Nathan Hochman. He's the new district attorney in Los Angeles. And today, he met with more than 20 members of the Menendez family who fully support a resentencing process for Eric and Lyle Menendez, who have been serving a 30-plus year sentence for their role in connection to the murder of their parents. And so, remember, this is what happens when a new district attorney comes in. He defeated the previous district attorney, George Gascon, and he said he is going to be reviewing the case. He was asked a number of questions there, and he gave a timeline for his office, his team of attorneys, by January 30th to have some type of answer for the public on what to go and do moving forward. So that's something we're going to be looking for. I know there's a lot of renewed attention in this case for the Menendez brothers, and so there you were just listening to Nathan Hochman, the new district attorney, about what his office has done about the case, what they are considering, and he provided as much detail as he could with some of the private conversations he had in this meeting today with multiple members of the Menendez family. So that's what we do here on Live Now from Fox. We bring you these events that happen live, raw, and uninterrupted there. So wanted to make sure we got that in. It's a major story. We'll stay with it. But let's take our final commercial break of this hour. We want to move from Los Angeles to Capitol Hill. A lot happening in Washington today. As you know, Speaker Mike Johnson getting the gavel back again for another term in this 119th Congress. And he made it through on the first ballot, although there were some hiccups, some snags. There had to be some political jockeying going on between President-elect Trump and some of these Republican members of Congress who weren't so sold on a Speaker Mike Johnson. We'll be breaking all of that down and more in 2 minutes. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft, and thanks for being with us. We do have some new reporting we want to bring to you from Fox News Capitol Hill correspondent Chad Pergram regarding Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. Pergram reporting Fox has learned that Vice President-elect J.D. Vance went to George Washington Hospital this afternoon for a planned minor surgery. A Vance spokesman says the Vice President-elect is having long-planned minor sinus surgery and will be back at work tomorrow. Now, Vance remains a senator for the time being. He was on Capitol Hill earlier today as Vice President Harris swore in new senators. So let's get to the news at hand about the speakership, the speaker race that Mike Johnson won pretty decisively, although there were a few holdouts that finally got on board. This didn't go more than one ballot today on the House floor. Our colleague, Fox News' Connor Hansen has more from Washington. Let's listen.
After a narrow vote, House Speaker Mike Johnson managed to keep his post in the new Congress. At the last minute, he was able to win over two key lawmakers.
The Honorable Mike Johnson of the state of Louisiana has received 218.
High drama on the House floor as Speaker Mike Johnson won re-election. At first, 3 Republicans voted for someone else, throwing the process into chaos once again. Johnson had this to say.
What we're proposing now is just simply, as President Trump likes to say, a return to common sense. And he's exactly right. That message resonated across the country.
With 434 members-elect present in the chamber, Johnson needed 218 votes. At first, he fell short at 216. Ralph Norman, Thomas Massie, and Keith Self were the 3 Republican detractors. But Speaker Johnson pulled Norman and Self aside and convinced them to change their votes before the gavel. Some have been unhappy with how Johnson handled recent spending bills.
They expect us to act as adults, and it's time for everyone to put their big boy pants on and get to work.
President-elect Trump endorsed Mike Johnson and made calls to other Republicans who seem to be on the fence. A speaker vote had not gone to a second round for 100 years until Speaker Kevin McCarthy took 15 rounds to get elected. It also took several rounds after McCarthy was ousted to select Mike Johnson for the first time. If Johnson had not been elected, members would not have been sworn in, and President-elect Trump's election wouldn't have been certified until a speaker was chosen. In New York, Connor Hansen, Fox News.
Connor, thanks so much. So like Connor said, this was all done just in the nick of time before the January 6th Electoral College certification happening there on Monday. Speaker Johnson there with a victory lap on his social media account with that photo saying it's an incredible honor to continue serving our great country as Speaker of the House. He says, now let's get to work. In the meantime here, let's bring into the conversation someone who is there for all of this today. That's our colleague at Fox News radio reporter, Ryan Schmelz. He joins me. Ryan, good to see you here. Glad we caught up because I know you've been running around the halls of the Capitol today. Give us a sense of how dicey this was after the first ballot was almost done here. What went on behind the scenes, not only with Johnson, but some of his allies and some of his colleagues in trying to win over some of these holdouts?
Right, Andrew. I think the sentiment around Capitol Hill was confusion. No one knew what was going on. You know, you had those 3 holdouts who voted for somebody not named Mike Johnson. You had Ralph Norman, Keith Self, Thomas Massie. Massie was not a shock, but you still had a number of Freedom Caucus members who were weary of Johnson still come out and eventually support him. Now, the vote was held open, though a lot of us were under the assumption that Johnson had failed in the first round, that we were eventually going to get a second round of voting. And then we were hearing that members were called back to immediately get ready to do a second ballot. Then it became clear that the first ballot was never actually called. And so during that delay, we are told that a number of members met in a room with 2 of those holdouts. You had Norman and Keith Self, as well as some lawmakers, and President-elect Trump was put on the speakerphone, and eventually Norman and Self were convinced that they should go and change their vote, and they ultimately did.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I was going to ask, what was President-elect Trump's role in all of this? Our colleague Brett Baer had This reporting today, he said he was told Trump has made calls to a few so-called undecided Republicans on the speaker vote. He reports, we are told all of those calls were positive for Johnson. And notably not on that list was Tom Massey. He obviously made his no vote. Very, very clear here. So Trump was intimately involved up to the last minute in getting Mike Johnson over the finish line here. What's the House Freedom Caucus, saying? Some of these members were in the caucus. They kind of run to the right of the rank and file Republican members here. How did they justify this to their caucus? They're no friends to Mike Johnson, but why did they back him this time?
Well, from the statements they put out and what they've been saying since then, a lot of this had less to do with Speaker Johnson and more to do with President-elect Trump. From what we understand, Trump was working the phones leading up to this vote. But I think the big thing here is that they felt there was a need to hit the ground running and to start passing President-elect Trump's agenda. Keep in mind, unlike the speaker battle involving Kevin McCarthy, this speaker battle was really up against the clock. They need to certify the election on Monday. They want to get reconciliation bills done before President-elect Trump even takes office in some cases. And so they're not going to be able to do that if they're deciding on who's going to be the Speaker of the House. So there's a sense of urgency here that you did not see 2 years ago with Kevin McCarthy. But I think based off the statements you see from the Freedom Caucus, they're still watching Johnson closely, but they've been convinced for the time being that this is what's best to get Trump's agenda across the finish line, but that does not guarantee that Speaker Mike Johnson is safe throughout the duration of this next Congress.
Okay, I want to talk about that in just a minute, but I have in front of me this memo that went out to House Freedom Caucus members explaining why they backed Johnson today. They say this: because of our steadfast support of President Trump and to ensure the timely certification of his electors, we did this despite our sincere reservations regarding the Speaker's track record over the past 15 months. Is it all about spending? Is it all about dollars? Is that where they draw the ire of Johnson?
That certainly is probably the big one, if not the biggest one, Andrew, but it's not the only one. And Thomas Massey, who is not a Freedom Caucus member, but has explained his frustration with Johnson, and a lot of that has to do with foreign aid. Johnson put a big foreign aid bill on the floor that involved aid to Ukraine, Israel, and did not include any pay-fors. And then you also have the FISA reauthorization. That's a federal surveillance program. Johnson was the deciding vote when it came to a provision in that would have had a warrant requirement attached to it. So that not getting through also ticked off Massey. Now, with the Freedom Caucus, I think a lot more of it is centered around spending and how Johnson has handled spending throughout his time as Speaker. But they've got some assurances now, but it seems like they're watching Johnson closely.
Okay, because a lot of this seems to stem from Johnson and what he has done, how he has already acted as Speaker, not necessarily, what he's going to do in a 119th Congress. So I thought that was interesting. Ryan, at this moment last year, we were covering the 15 rounds of the Speaker and the gavel race after members voted out Kevin McCarthy as Speaker. So we all know how that went. That was very dramatic. That was very chaotic. Now, the mechanism procedurally to oust the Speaker, from what I understand in the rules package that passed over the weekend, the threshold has been raised. What does that mean? Help us explain that.
Right. So the rules package that McCarthy was governing under said that any one member, no matter what political party, could bring a motion to vacate to the floor, and the House would have to vote on that motion to vacate. Matt Gaetz did it with Speaker McCarthy. Speaker McCarthy was ousted after a number of pretty much every Democrat and then a number of Republicans came on board and decided to vote to oust Speaker McCarthy. So the House Freedom Caucus and the House Main Street Caucus, a more moderate-leaning conference of Republicans, met behind closed doors. They negotiated a new change to it. And so now the new threshold is that you have to have 9 members to bring up a motion to vacate in order to bring up that vote. But what drew the ear of Democrats when it comes to this is that only the majority party is the ones who can bring up the motion to vacate. So a lot of Democrats are very frustrated about that, hence why you saw Democrats really not want to vote for the rules package today.
Okay, Ryan Schmelz, as always, there live for us on Capitol Hill. Ryan, thanks for providing that great insight and reporting. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good, Andrew. Thank you.
All right, in the meantime here, President-elect Donald Trump weighing in on Speaker Johnson winning the Speaker's gavel today, posting on Truth Social, congratulations to Speaker Mike Johnson for receiving an unprecedented vote of confidence in Congress. Mike will be a great speaker, and our country will be the beneficiary. The people of America have waited 4 years for common sense, strength, and leadership. They'll get it now, and America will be greater than ever before. Also, in an exclusive to Fox News Digital, Trump was also reacting to this. He said it was a, quote, great honor to have helped in this. He said it is all a great continuation of Make America Great Again. He said Mike Johnson will do a fabulous job as Speaker, telling Fox News Digital House Republican membership was fantastic. All right, in the meantime here, let's keep it going. We do have some of these remarks from Speaker Johnson today there on the House floor after getting the gavel. Let's watch.
This chamber has placed in me. It is the great honor of my life to serve this body with all of you. Of course, these are difficult days in our home state of Louisiana, where I come from. We all know about the terrorist attack in New Orleans, and it's really shaken our state. People are reeling from that attack. It took the lives of 14 innocent people, and it injured dozens more. And I wanted to begin appropriately today. If we could, I'd ask you all to join me in a moment of silence for the victims of this horrific act. Thank you. Thank you for that. I believe in giving honor where honor is due, and all of us do well to honor our spouses. My wife happens to be here this time. She didn't make it last time. It happened a little sudden. Kelly, would you stand up here in the gallery? Thank you. And we have our 4 children here, Hannah, Abby, Jack, and Will. We all stand up just really quickly. Come on. I wanted to do that. All of us recognize that there are no perks to being a congressman's kid, right? It's all sacrifice. And our spouses put up with so much, endless hours in travel and all the responsibilities upon us. And we're good to remind them how important they are to us and how we could not do the job without them. And so it's appropriate for all of us to do that. Thank you. Thank you, guys. This is a momentous time in the nation of the history of our nation. It really is. And as members of the 119th Congress, we are stewards of the great American Revolution that began almost exactly now 250 years ago, 1775 and 1776. It will fall at the time of this Congress, the great anniversary. And in these 2.5 centuries, we've been reminded repeatedly that freedom is never free. And we have stood tall as the greatest nation on the face of the earth. It is without debate. We are the freest, the most powerful, most benevolent nation that has ever been in the history of the world. And it's not by happenstance. We are the ones who settled the West. We are the ones who ended slavery, who laid the transcontinental railroad, who gave women the right to vote, who won 2 world wars, who landed on the moon, and who won the Cold War. Throughout our history, we have done what no one thought was possible. And still, at 250 years old, our nation is actually a young nation. This past fall, I had an opportunity to go to the G7 speakers meeting. It was held in Italy. It's the only international trip I took as speaker over the last 14 months because I didn't have time to do it, but it was a quick 3-day jaunt, and met with my colleagues, the speakers of the other parliaments, the great governments around the world. And we talked about that, how really special America is, how unique we are in our place on the globe, and how important it is for us to maintain that. And as I talked to these colleagues from around the world, I thought, our closest allies, who recognize how important we are, how important this body, this House is. I thought about how is it that such a young country has become so exceptional, so singular in its importance, that today stands as the world's leader in liberty and the economy and culture. 100 years ago, President Calvin Coolidge answered that very question in his inaugural address. It was March of 100 years ago, exactly almost. He said this: "We best serve our own country and most successfully discharge our obligations to humanity by continuing to be openly and candidly, intensely and scrupulously American." I love that. I love that. Today, yeah, that's right. That's an applause line. Today, my friends, our nation is the envy of the world. Why? Because we have been marked by a spirit and a people who are explicitly that. We are explicitly American. We don't try to be like other nations, and we recognize that a strong America is good for the entire world. And everybody around the globe knows that. That's right. We also recognize that the core principles that made America what we are must still be preserved today. The principles, I call them the 7 core principles of American conservatism, but it's really the 7 core principles of the nation itself. Individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, and human dignity. These are the ingredients, the things that made us who we are. And in America, we know that human flourishing is best achieved by adherence to time-tested truths. We could list a number of those simple truths. Here's a couple. It's better to give a hand up than a hand out. That innovation thrives when bureaucracy dies. The simple truth that it is parents and families and not administrators that must be in charge of their children's education. The path of prosperity has long been paved with policies that put America and Americans first. And that is what we will champion in the 119th Congress. We have a mandate, and that was shown in the election cycle. The people want an America First agenda. They do. Sadly, for the past 4 years of divided government, too many politicians in Washington have done the opposite. Open borders and overregulation have destroyed our cities and stifled innovation. Inflation and weak leadership have left Americans poorer, and they have placed our country in a perilous position. That's right. But in recent months, we've witnessed something happening, something that's really remarkable, a political moment in our modern history, a groundswell of Americans from every state, race, and religion who now demand that we put the interest of Americans first again, and we will, and we will. This is a powerful new coalition of our country. It's a coalition that insists that we purge the policies of America last and we bury them in the graveyard of history's mistakes, because it was a big mistake. To that end, this Congress will renounce the status quo and we will listen to the voices of the people. We will act quickly and we will start by defending our nation's borders. That's the #1 priority. Yes. In coordination with President Trump, this Congress will give our border and immigration enforcement agents the resources that they need to do their job. We will secure the border, we will deport dangerous, criminal, illegal aliens, and finally finish building the border wall. You said you'd work with us on that, Hakeem. I'm counting on it. After 4 years of high inflation, we have a big agenda. We have a lot to do, and we can do it in a bipartisan fashion. We can fight high inflation, and we must. We'll give relief to Americans, and we'll extend the Trump tax cuts. We're going to protect our industries from one-sided trade deals, and we're going to bring overseas investments back to America's shores. That's right. We'll defeat the harmful effects of inflation, and we'll make life affordable again for America's hardworking people. As leaders of a nation with vast natural resources that God has blessed us with, it is our duty to restore America's energy dominance, and that's what we'll do. We have to apply common sense. We have to stop the attacks on liquefied natural gas, pass legislation to eliminate the Green New Deal, that funding. We're going to expedite new drilling permits. We're going to save the jobs of our auto manufacturers, and we're going to do that by ending the ridiculous EV mandates. And as heirs to the American Revolution and the descendants of patriots who defied tyranny, in the coming months, we are going to pass legislation to roll back the totalitarian fourth branch of government known as the administrative state.
Okay, so we just wanted to show you a little bit of House Speaker Mike Johnson's address there to his colleagues in the House chamber after winning the gavel for a second time now. So let's take a quick commercial break. I'm Andrew Kraft. It's about 6:15 here Mountain Time, about 8:15 there in Washington. When we come back, though, you'll also be hearing from the House Minority Leader, the Democrat from New York, Hakeem Jeffries, will have some of his remarks. Also, we are following a major kind of announcement from the Surgeon General today linking alcohol and cancer. All of that and more after the break. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Hope you're having a good start to your weekend on this first Friday of 2025. I want to put this up here. Take a look at this. This is from U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy. He says this: today, I'm releasing a Surgeon General's advisory on the causal link between alcohol consumption and increased cancer risk. Alcohol, he says, is the third leading preventable cause of cancer in the U.S., contributing to about 100,000 cancer cases and 20,000 cancer deaths each year. So this is quite something for an advisory. It comes as research and evidence is mounting about the bad effects that alcohol has on human health. But Murthy's proposal for a label would require a rare approval from Congress. So Murthy argues in the advisory that Americans should be better informed about the link between alcohol and cancer. Fox News correspondent William LaJeunesse has more on this from Los Angeles.
You may want to think before you take your next drink. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy calling for updated labels on alcoholic beverages, warning Americans about cancer risks associated with drinking.
I don't think it would make any difference. If people want to drink, they will drink regardless of any warnings. It's like with the smoking.
Well, I think even though it might not help, it might make people stop and, take a second thought about it. So in that respect, it may help a little bit.
Alcohol consumption, including hard alcohol, beer, and wine, can increase your chance of cancer, including liver, breast, throat, and colorectal cancer. And the risk increases the more you drink. Dr. Murthy warns drinking even moderate amounts can put you at a greater risk for disease, saying, quote, the risk of developing cancer may start to increase around 1 or fewer drinks per day. In fact, a recent Canadian study found just 2 drinks a week can take 2 to 3 days off your life. That jumps to 2.5 months if you consume 7 a week.
Science now tells us that drinking any alcohol has risks.
Drinking alcohol is the third leading preventable cause of cancer in the U.S. after tobacco and obesity. The country's top doc argues that booze is to blame for nearly 1 million avoidable cancer cases in the U.S. over the last decade and roughly 20,000 alcohol-related cancer deaths each year. Before an updated warning can be applied, it would need approval from Congress. In Los Angeles, William Lajeunesse, Fox News.
William, thanks so much. Well, you know, bottles of beer, wine, and liquor already carry warning labels that say pregnant women should not drink and that alcohol consumption can impair someone's ability to drive a car. But Murthy's proposed label would go even further than that, raising awareness about the risk for cancer alcohol proposes as well. But any such warning label would need the approval of Congress. So wanted to get that in. Speaking of Congress, let's go back out to the House floor from earlier today. You heard there from Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, as he was sworn in as Speaker for a second time. Well, the leader of the opposition for the Democrats, of course, from New York, the Democrat Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, also had the chance to address the chamber. This is what he had to say.
Time for us to come together, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans, to get things done for the people. In that spirit, House Democrats will work hard to find bipartisan common ground with our Republican colleagues and the incoming administration on any issue, whenever and wherever possible, in order to make life better for everyday Americans. For far too long in this country, the cost of living has gone up, but the size of the middle class has come down. Housing costs are too high. Grocery costs are too high. Child care costs are too high. Insurance costs are too high. Utility costs are too high. America is too expensive. There are far too many people in this great country who for decades have been struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. That is not acceptable in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We need to build an affordable economy for hard-working American taxpayers, and we need to build it now. It's time for us to come together and finally lower the high cost of living in the United States of America once and for all. And we will work with anyone of any party to get that done. We will work with anyone to secure our borders, and we will work with anyone to fix our broken immigration system in a comprehensive and bipartisan manner. At the same period of time, we will push back against far-right extremism whenever necessary. So let me be clear. Social Security and Medicare are not entitlement programs. They are earned benefits. Hard-working American taxpayers pay in to Social Security and Medicare every day, every week, every month, every year throughout their entire adult life. They've earned those benefits, worked hard for those benefits, and deserve those benefits. So as Democrats, our promise to the American people is that we will fight hard to make sure that no one in this town takes away Social Security or Medicare from the American people. Not now, not ever. No means never. Our position is that it is not acceptable to cut Social Security, cut Medicare, cut Medicaid, cut veterans' benefits, or cut nutritional assistance from children and families in order to pay for massive tax breaks for billionaires and wealthy corporations. House Democrats will fight hard to protect working class Americans and the things that matter to them, not the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. Keep your hands off Social Security and Medicare. Over the last 4 years, it's been a great honor for us to work alongside President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, whose administration rescued the economy from a once-in-a-century pandemic, delivered historic infrastructure investments, created more than 15 million good-paying jobs, enacted common-sense gun safety legislation for the first time in 30 years, provided life-sustaining health insurance to veterans suffering from toxic exposure, championed the largest investment in combating the climate crisis in the history of the world, which we will defend, and brought down the high price of life-saving prescription drugs for millions of Americans. Thank you, President Biden and Vice President Harris, for your powerful, principled, and purposeful public service. Thank you. Two months ago, the American people elected Donald Trump as the 47th President of the United States of America. Thank you for that very generous applause. It's okay. There are no election deniers on our side of the aisle. You see, one should love America. One should love America when you win and when you lose. That's the patriotic thing to do, and that's the America that House Democrats will fight hard to preserve, because we love this country. America is bigger than any one campaign, any one election, or any one individual. America, the land of the free and the home of the brave. Let us never forget that our country is free, not simply because we are strong. America is strong because we are free. That freedom is now under assault. There are some in this country who apparently believe that the freedom of economic opportunity that made them wealthy should not apply to everyone else. Our message to that crowd is simple. Democrats will never abandon the long walk toward freedom. We will fight hard to defend the freedom of opportunity that makes the American dream possible. We will fight hard for the freedom to vote, and to fight for a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We will fight for the freedom to organize and join a union of your choice. We will fight to defend the free enterprise system, but work hard to make sure that it actually works for working class Americans. And we will always defend a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. America promises one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That's the America House Democrats will fight hard to preserve. God bless you. God bless the House of Representatives. May God continue to bless the United States of America. It is now my responsibility to present the gavel to the gentleman from the great state of Louisiana, the son of a firefighter, a God-fearing man, a husband, and a loving father of four, the 56th Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, the Honorable Mike Johnson.
All right, so there you see Jeffries and Johnson on the dais today. Johnson with the gavel. And you heard from Johnson already. We're going to step away for a quick commercial break. It's a little past the bottom of the hour here. I'm Andrew Kraft. Hope you're getting a good start to your weekend. When we come back, we want to dive a little deeper, though, into President Biden's decision today to block the sale of U.S. steel to Japanese steelmaker Nippon Steel. Well, why did he do it? We'll have some of those answers in 2 minutes. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. I want to put up this tweet here from Fox News' Lucas Tomlinson, the White House saying Biden has blocked the sale of U.S. steel by Japan's Nippon Corporation. Lucas Tomlinson has more. Here's his report.
This is not about Japan. It's not.
Today, President Biden blocked the $15 billion acquisition of U.S. steel by a Japanese corporation. Biden did not speak about his decision. The White House issued a statement. This acquisition would place one of America's largest steel producers under foreign control and create risk for our national security and our critical supply chains. Japan is considered one of the U.S.'s strongest allies. More than 50,000 American troops are based there, along with dozens of warships since World War II. Japan's Nippon Steel had offered the U.S. government the ability to veto any restrictions to the company's steel production. The United Steelworkers Union supports Biden's decision, but many of its members, the workers, wanted the deal to go through to protect their jobs, according to the Washington Post. In a joint statement, Nippon and U.S. Steel are calling Biden's decision politically motivated, saying blocking this transaction means denying billions of committed investment to extend the life of U.S. Steel's aging facilities and putting thousands of good-paying, family-sustaining union jobs at risk. The White House rejected the statement.
That's a hypothetical. I'm not going to get into hypotheticals.
A top economic advisor to President Obama accused Biden of being short-sighted. President Biden claiming Japan's investment in an American steel company is a threat to national security is a pathetic and craven cave to special interests that will make America less prosperous and safe. It's not often that President Biden and President-elect Trump agree. This time they do. They both want U.S. steel to stay in American hands. At the White House, Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News.
Lucas, thanks so much. Let's bring to the conversation our friend there at Barron's, Al Root. He covers this a lot here, and he joins me. I wanted to bring this up with you, Al, because, you and I have discussed this for so long, Al joining us. And I want to ask you this, is it really about national security concerns? Because I thought Japan was an ally, was a friend, or is it about labor concerns, about union workers who did not want to see this go through here? I only ask because in the statement from the United Steelworkers Union, they say this: Nippon has proven itself to be a serial trade cheater that for decades worked to undermine our domestic industry by dumping its products into our market. Now, the head of U.S. Steel, Al, called President Biden's action today shameful and corrupt. So which is it? National security or labor?
Well, to answer a question you didn't ask, and I'm happy to say this, it's shameful and corrupt. It's nonsense. It's politically motivated. Japan is not a steel dumper. China is a steel dumper. It has utterly nothing to do with economics. Craven, shameful, those words are closer to what actually is going on. So yeah, it's just a bad decision that will ultimately lead to more steel imports and a weaker domestic industry. To say it makes no sense would be to insult common sense.
Okay, so obviously very strong language here. Al, though, what remedy does Nippon or U.S. Steel have now? I mean, can they appeal this, or is this the kind of final nail in the coffin, so to speak?
So here, it's funny. And to answer the other question, it was politically motivated. It wasn't necessarily about labor. The United Steelworkers favored an original bid from Cleveland-Cliffs that would create a more consolidated U.S. industry. We can argue whether that's good or bad. The idea that they said this is, a serial trade cheat, that's just nonsense. It's not backed up factually by any analysis whatsoever. So, Nippon just simply waded into a political issue, believing that common sense would prevail. They waded into it during an election year with a swing state, and this is where we are at now. And then, of course, it was all done under the guise of national security. We're talking less than 5% of American steel is sold to the military. These mills are still operated by Americans. There is no highly confidential technology in steelmaking, a 125-year-old industry now. So, it's not even labor and it's not even political. It's someone effectively believing that this could have won votes when it didn't swing the state. And this is just where we're at. Now, both companies say they're going to pursue legal remedies. So I don't know who you can sue to make this happen. President Trump doesn't like the deal either. So we should all assume the deal is dead.
Okay, so from what I understand, though, the parameters of the deal that were in place, the U.S. Steel, at least, members of its corporate governance would have had a relative degree of independence and authority and oversight still over the company. It wasn't like, Nippon Steel's people were going to come in and say, you got to do it, this is my way or the highway here, from what I understand.
So there is examples of Japanese steel owning American steel in the past. Former iterations called NKK, they've owned assets in Canada and the U.S. National Steel, which ultimately went bankrupt when it was bought by U.S. Steel, was once owned by a Japanese company. In those situations, you have Japanese engineers. Sometimes you have Japanese managers, but you have American engineers and you have American managers and you have American steel workers. It's just like any other, foreign-owned organization that you can imagine, right? Let's, go to Spartansburg, South Carolina, and watch BMW make cars there. Who's running the assembly line? Who are the workers answering to? I mean, they're answering to Americans, and BMW simply wants access to the very attractive U.S. market. Sure. That's exactly what Nippon's strategy was. They don't have a big they're the fourth largest steelmaker in the world. They don't have a large presence in the U.S. And they said, you know what? U.S. Steel is for sale. It would make sense for us to invest billions of dollars in the U.S. And the U.S. said, nope, we don't want it.
So, Al, there's this, regulatory body, it's known as CFIUS, that approves all of this here. And we can get into that. But in the joint statement by Nippon and U.S. Steel, they said, since the outset of the regulatory review process, we have diligently and transparently engaged with CFIUS. So, first, what is CFIUS, and where did that committee come down on this? They voted, right?
Yeah, so actually they punted, right? So they're supposed to be non-political, which is, they've damaged their reputation. It is what it is. They've damaged their reputation. People can come on and tell me I'm wrong.
But what is this?
It's a Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., right? And it was created in the 70s, and it was strengthened in 2018, and it's supposed to deal with national security. Hundreds of deals reviewed. It's blocked 9. Most of the deals have to do with like semiconductor technology. Lattice Semi was tried to buy, somebody tried to buy Lattice Semiconductor a while back. ByteDance tried to buy something, TikTok's parent, that was a little while ago. If you look at the deals that they've blocked, and we're talking less than 10% of deals blocked, one stands out like a sore thumb, steel, because it's relatively tiny. It's 125-year-old technology, and it doesn't make any sense. So it's supposed to be nonpartisan. It's supposed to make recommendations to the president. They didn't make an official recommendation. They basically just said, you know what, it's up to Joe. And then he did what everyone expected he would do.
Okay. Yeah, this was a lengthy statement I have in front of me from President Biden. I'm going to read it in just a moment here. I mean, is this a bellwether for more of these types of cases in the upcoming Trump administration, or should we just look at it standalone in a vacuum?
No, the problem is the real the global problem is the executive branch using basically their authority to protect national security to do anything.
Okay.
Okay. So then you can have you can worry that CFIUS and any sort of deals or foreign investment can be sort of vetoed by the executive branch. It's not necessarily what you want in a dynamic economy. That's the risk. Okay. Now, will someone try? This is unfortunately sort of, we all know who Andrew Carnegie is. We all know U.S. Steel. We all buy like cars with steel in them, and it's very easy. It's probably easier to understand than like Lattice Semiconductor, another deal that got blocked. It was an election year. It was headquartered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Joe Biden, who fancies himself in a statement, pro-union president of all time, had the United Steelworkers campaigning and aligned with him. So there is reason also to say, Al, calm down, it'll be fine. But there is the fear that this nonpartisan committee can sort of be expanded and used to sort of do what the executive branch wants with foreign transactions.
All right, Al, we're going to have to leave it at that. It seems like that story is, somewhat over for now, but I'm sure we'll be talking a lot in this 2025. Al Root, as always, thanks so much.
See you, Andrew.
All right, in the meantime here, one more note on this story. I want to read from portions of President Biden's statement. He was kind of outlining his rationale for why he blocked this today. Let's go back live to the White House. And so President Biden says this: as I have said many times, steel production and the steel workers who produce it are the backbone of our nation. A strong domestically owned and operated steel industry represents an essential national security priority and is critical for resilient supply chains. That is because steel powers our country, our infrastructure, our auto industry, and our defense industrial base. Without domestic steel production and domestic steel workers, our nation is less strong and less secure. Biden goes on to say, for too long, U.S. steel companies have faced unfair trade practices as foreign companies have dumped steel on global markets at artificially low prices, leading to job losses and factory closures in America. I've taken decisive action to level the playing field for American steel workers and steel producers by tripling tariffs on steel imports from China. With record investments in manufacturing, more than 100 new steel and iron mills have opened since I took office, and U.S. companies are producing the cleanest steel in the world. Today, the domestic steel industry is the strongest it has been in years. He says we need major U.S. companies representing the major share of U.S. steelmaking capacity to keep leading the fight on behalf of America's national interests. He says, as a committee of national security and trade experts across the executive branch determined, this acquisition would place one of America's largest steel producers under foreign control and create risk for our national security and our critical supply chains. He says, so that is why I am taking action to block this deal. So wanted to get that in there. All right, in the meantime here, we are still going strong. We've got a lot more top headlines left to get to on this Friday night. We'll be back in just a moment. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Thanks for being with us here. Almost at the top of the hour, we do want to just show you what I'm looking at right now. Take a look at this. We unfortunately missed this SpaceX launch live there from Florida. According to the Associated Press, a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket launched a satellite to geostationary transfer orbit. On behalf of this company, the company is called Yasat. It's a telecommunications company and satellite service provider based in the United Arab Emirates. So you see there the trajectory of that rocket launch with these satellites on board. And this was done from Cape Canaveral there at the Space Force Station on Florida's Space Coast. So, fortunately, we missed that, but we have a live picture there of its trajectory and wanted to bring it to you. It's something we're monitoring. Another thing we're monitoring, we're moving from Florida now to the Korean Peninsula. Take a look at this. Yet more political dysfunction continuing there in Seoul, South Korea. Now, what you're looking at right now, supporters there of South Korea's impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol. Remember, Yeol so far defied an arrest warrant. Well, his supporters, they are gathering near the presidential residence to protect him from being detained. Now, a Seoul court issued a warrant to detain Yoon and a separate warrant to search his residence on Tuesday, but enforcing them is complicated as long as he remains in his official residence. So this turned quite tense yesterday. You literally had police and law enforcement go to serve an arrest warrant to the former president and to take him into custody and to detain him. His personal protective service that protects him tussled with and fought with those law enforcement officials who were trying to detain him. They were unsuccessful. So now you are seeing right now there in Seoul, South Korea, the South Korean capital, supporters of Yoon gathering near the presidential residence to protect him from being detained. So he still has not been detained. Remember, he was impeached over that effort in December that he made to impose martial law on South Korea. Remember, it was only in place for about 5 hours. The National Assembly there unanimously voted to rescind that. Yoon's political future was up in the air, hanging by a thread after that, and then he was impeached by the National Assembly, and now there is an arrest warrant for him, although he has not been detained yet in execution of that arrest warrant because those protecting him, his kind of protective detail, are shielding him at the presidential residence. So this is going to be quite a problem to enforce this. It remains complicated as long as he remains in his official residence there. So I thought that was interesting. Remember, South Korea, one of our closest allies in East Asia, one of our closest friends, going through it, so to speak, as the kids say. So this is a story we're going to stay on top of. Wanted to get that in. Let's get our final commercial break in this hour. You see there, not entirely sure what time it is there in Seoul, South Korea, but these are supporters of Yoon. Wow, look at that. Look at that sign. I didn't even notice that. Stop the steal. Okay, so stop the steal, of course. It's a common refrain from former President Trump and his supporters in the wake of the 2020 election, and it looks like supporters of Yoon have adopted the phrase themselves. Even though Yoon has been impeached, he's holed up at the presidential residence. Nonetheless, a throng of his supporters have come out in his defense today. It's almost 11 a.m. there on an early Saturday morning in Seoul there. So wanted to make sure we got that in. A final commercial break. We'll see you in 2 minutes. When we come back, though, we did hear from Las Vegas officials today, both police and FBI, about that Cybertruck explosion on New Year's Day outside of Trump Tower there, the Trump Hotel, off the Las Vegas Strip. We're getting a better picture of some of the motivations behind the suspect who did it. We'll have that for you in 2 minutes. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Like I said before the break, as we approach the top of the hour, we do want to get into more updates in the investigation there in Las Vegas. You'll remember on New Year's Day in the early morning hours, that Cybertruck that was driven from Denver to Las Vegas, it exploded outside of the Trump Hotel there. We have some new video as well of the Cybertruck being towed out of there. And we also learned some new details in a press conference today. Well, remember, Matthew Livelsberger was the suspect's name, 37-year-old Green Beret. He was active duty highly decorated. He fatally shot himself in that Cybertruck just before it blew up outside the hotel. Well, he left notes saying the explosion was a stunt to serve as a quote-unquote wake-up call for the country's ills. So he wrote in notes that he left on his cell phone that he needed to quote-unquote cleanse his mind of the brothers I've lost and relieve myself of the burden of the lives I took. Livelsberger served in the Army since 2006 and deployed twice to Afghanistan. He was on an official leave while serving in Germany as well. We want to bring into the conversation now our friend from Berna Law Enforcement, Josh Sherrard. He joins me. And Josh, thanks for being with us here. I know you've been following this very, very closely. I got to wish you a Happy New Year, but this is a really, really terrible story that we got to get into here. There was a report today in Reuters that officials are on high alert, not just from the Las Vegas situation, but also, of course, from the New Orleans terror attack of potential copycats. Is that always the case in the wake of these? The threat of copycats?
Yeah, unfortunately, when we see something that's as motivated as one of these attacks, whether it was, politically motivated as an international terrorist attack driven by possible ISIS ties, or politically, internally, domestically, as we see a little bit in the Vegas attack, you have some people that may not be that radicalized yet, but see these as martyrs, that see these suspects, these attackers as martyrs, and feel like they're paving the road to something that they can do as well to make a statement like they did. And unfortunately, yes, we do. And part of it is that drive, is that motivation, is that leadership of, hey, I can make a statement like this person. And the other part is literally a how-to. Both these, in their own way, obviously the New Orleans was, more deadly than the Vegas attack, but they set a precedent in a literal how-to to get attention, to cause mayhem, chaos, to divide people. And so unfortunately, it makes it all that much easier for those that may be thinking they want to make a statement to just do something very similar.
There are so many similarities and hallmarks to these two incidents in New Orleans and Las Vegas, one of which is we heard extensively from the perpetrators of both of these attacks. Now that investigators there in Las Vegas, seized the cell phone and the devices from the Cybertruck itself and got many, many terabytes of data. Same thing with Jabbar there in New Orleans, getting his devices, going over the data, saying that he had posted just hours before the rampage, pledging his allegiance to ISIS. In the Las Vegas case, though, Josh, obviously the question of motive always presents itself in the wake of these things. But from this press conference we heard in Las Vegas today, the motive was plain as day. He said this, Livelsberger said, this was not a terrorist attack. It was a wake-up call. Americans only pay attention to spectacles and violence. He said, what better way to get my point across than a stunt with fireworks and explosives? That's not subtle, Josh.
No, look, terrorism boiled down to its fundamental roots is the violence, using violence or the threat of violence to further an ideology, be it religious, political belief, moral, whatever it might be. So if you're trying to use violence or that threat of violence to further that and to make a statement, just like he wrote, whether he wants to call it a wake-up call or not, that in itself is fundamentally terrorism. Whether it's domestic, whether it's international, it really doesn't matter. And that's the issue we have here. Now, I do believe that in the Vegas attack, with his background, he may have been able to be more effective, more deadly, to cause a larger explosion if he had wanted to. So there may be a certain merit to his statement that he really was just trying to make a statement. Regardless of that, it's still terrorism, and that's what people need to understand. Look at, I think one of the last times we talked about the CEO of United Healthcare shooting, and they put a terrorist charge on him. That was terrorism as well, because he's using violence to try to push an ideology, to push a mindset on a section of people. So that's what we really need to understand here is he can say that all day long. It's still terrorism.
Yeah, no, I think that's so interesting because it does say, having covered these stories in the last, 3-4 months here, small t terrorism is somewhat on a spectrum. Yes, the lowest common denominator of a definition is it causes violence, causes harm, and the like here. And then it gets added with, to your point, some of these political, religious motivations of to why the terrorism was carried out. But that is specific, though, radical Islamic terror in the New Orleans case to say, and I'm learning that it depends on who is saying that at a press conference. What agency they represent, who gets to make that determination that now we are investigating this as a terror-related incident or a terror attack here. That's been ruled out in Las Vegas. Put aside what Livelsberger is saying that this is a terror attack. The investigators there are saying we're not investigating it like this. This is a one-off lone wolf guy.
Well, they may not be investigating it as a terrorist attack and specifically as international terrorism or terrorism driven. But I guarantee if that suspect were still alive, we would probably be looking at certain terrorist charges or terrorism charges tacked on to whatever charges they had. So once again, while they may not investigate it as such because they don't believe their international terrorist organization involvement in that, it still comes back to what we define it as. And really, in a lot of these cases, tacking terrorism onto that and using that moniker to label it, all that really does too is really helps involve other agencies. It really helps bring in some federal agencies to try to help communicate and collaborate with local law enforcement to make sure that we have an understanding of exactly what's going on and that we aren't looking at a bigger picture or a bigger threat here.
Josh, it's so interesting, too, because according to the press conference, we're going to play it in just a minute, Tesla engineers helped extract data from the Cybertruck itself for investigators, and they helped determine where this came from. Because obviously, if you're driving from Colorado Springs, where it originated, and you're going all the way to Las Vegas, you need to stop on the way to charge it. And so I thought that was an interesting kind of nexus with tech and law enforcement about putting the pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen this before when we've been investigating a crime. Where we look at LPRs, license plate readers, to try to backtrack somebody's actions, especially when they're traveling across states or across big cities. But now we're starting to see this introduction of technology that kind of renders that obsolete, where we have so many data points in these cars, not only just GPS, but of their own, but GPS that's embedded in these cars. And as we progress forward, especially with a lot of legislation that we're seeing about having speed monitors in cars to give you an alert if you're speeding. Well, that requires GPS data. So as we start moving forward, I think we're really going to see that shift in that investigative outlet of using somewhat surveillance-based tracking agents to the GPSs that are native in those cars, which opens up a whole new lane of investigation and ability to really expedite some of that initial investigation to backtrack that suspect's actions.
Yeah, to your point, Josh, this was it was gleaned and determined quite quickly, where this Cybertruck originated from. He rented it there in Denver, and so I thought that was interesting. I wanted to talk about his background, his experience. Livelsberger, 37 years old. He drove all the way. There's been reporting out there suggesting, he had issues at home. We've heard from him in these writings, recovered from his mobile devices at length about what he was going through, his mental state at the time here. Well, yesterday in the press conference, I thought it was interesting because it alluded to something you brought up. He's an active duty Green Beret at the time of this. And law enforcement officials at yesterday's press briefing in Vegas said that the level of sophistication of this explosion they thought would have borne the hallmark of something more sophisticated, knowing Livelsberger's background here. What did you make of that? They're essentially saying, knowing what we know about his background, we thought it was going to be more explosive.
Yeah, and as a former Army infantry officer, I get explosives training, and then as a former SWAT officer and SWAT commander, I've gotten more explosives training, but not nearly to the degree as an Army Green Beret, as a Special Forces soldier, especially one that's been in as long as he has, decorated with 5 Bronze Stars. He's seen so much action, in his career. So this leads me down 2 possible routes. The first is that it was just a statement. He wasn't trying to do a massive amount of damage and a massive amount of destruction. That he knew that this would it would cause a lot of fire, a big fireball, but really wouldn't cause all that destruction. Or the other route is that he decided to do this very quickly, that this wasn't a very planned event. He knew he was home on leave. There's obviously some mental health issues that are part of this decision, but it was done very quickly, and he just got what he could get his hands on to make the statement that he wanted to make, and not have all that time to plan. So I think we're looking at one of those 2 options. The overarching the issue here is definitely that mental health, and I think a lot of that is going to be combat driven, and I think that as we move forward, we're going to see a lot of that come out.
Yeah, and when you talk about prevention or how to stop something like this from happening, he was able to rent a Cybertruck, drive it many hours, pull up there to outside the lobby of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. He shot himself before this went off, and many things were found in the Cybertruck here. But if you're a law enforcement agency, if you're Las Vegas Metro, if you're the FBI, how do you prepare for something like that? That just seems so random. Obviously, Livelsberger prepared this methodically here, but on New Year's Day, how can you see that coming?
You don't, and that's the short answer, and that's the answer that unfortunately a lot of the public doesn't want to hear. Is law enforcement looks at threats in two manners, and it's what's most likely to happen and what's the worst case scenario, and then we have to focus resources somewhere in between there. And unfortunately, you can't defend on all fronts. The prevention in this case started years ago. It started months and years ago, really with that mental health, really with how can we make sure that these soldiers that are seeing this much combat are receiving the mental health care that they need so that it doesn't go this far. This is obviously, as we've talked about, this was not a radicalized Islamist. This was not, some sort of terrorist faction that was coming over here. This was one man who was, what's that?
He's a U.S. service member.
Exactly. This was one man that was clearly distraught enough that he felt that he needed to kill himself and make a statement like this to the public. So, unfortunately, what people don't want to hear is you just can't prevent everything. You have to take your priorities, the resources you have available, and direct it where you think is going to help defend your communities the best.
All right, Josh Sherrard, as always, with Berna Law Enforcement. Can't thank you enough. Of course, sorry we're talking about this terrible circumstances. I do want to wish you a happy new year. I think we'll be talking a lot, though, in 2025. Thanks so much, Josh.
Absolutely. Have a good night.